why on earth would you want to be a politician? And the simple answer is, I don't. I don't want to be a career politician climbing the greasy pole. I want to be something different. I want to be a troublemaker. I want to rattle cages, I want to ruffle feathers, and I want to shake politics out of its complacency. But not in the cause of tribalism or division or chaos, but in the cause of progress, in the cause of change, in the cause of this constituency. My community, my friends, my neighbours. I want to make trouble for anyone who complacently believes that the status quo is good enough for the people of Hastings and Rye, and it isn't. Politics, obviously, for all the reasons we know, has a bad name. It's currently a huge turn-off for all of us. And we may not be interested in politics, but politics is surely, newsflash, is surely interested in us. Politics governs our lives, it shapes our present, our prosperity, our happiness, and our futures. And moreover, our children's futures. And when you're a parent, as I am, you do start to think, what sort of a world are my children going to inherit? Are they going to be safe? Are they going to be happy? Are they going to be free? Will they have a home, a planet? Will their hopes be fulfilled? And I started to think, I don't know. And that's a very powerful spur to getting involved in how society is run. And frankly, that's why I'm standing here today. And I suspect that's why all of you are here as well. Because we all know that things have to change fundamentally. But please don't believe that change is just a default change of government. It's not a new status quo for 5 years. It's a transformation in the way we do politics. We don't want politics done to us. We want politics done with us and for us, in our interests, not in the interests of political parties. And that's what distinguishes the Liberal Democrats from Labour and the Conservatives. Because unlike the other two parties, we seek power only to give it back to the people, not to sequester it at Westminster. We want to give back power by way of a reformed electoral system, which is the only way our politics is ever truly going to change, and is ever truly going to represent us. Because let's be clear, today we don't live in a democracy. The country is routinely run by governments supported by a minority. In 2019, 32 million votes were cast. 22.6 million votes didn't contribute to electing an MP. 71% of votes were wasted. Either they were surplus, or they were cast for a candidate who wasn't elected. 22 million votes counted for nothing. I mean, were those people any better off than their ancestors before 1832? Imagine those 22 million people, let's cut them arbitrarily in half. Let's say 11 million of them were women. Were they any less disenfranchised than their grandmothers and great-grandmothers before 1928? I think the suffragettes would be rolling in their graves, turning in their graves. Is it any wonder that people think politicians don't listen? They don't have to. Yet the Conservatives and Labour, cynically, I think, support this short-sighted, confrontational system, which is corroding faith in democracy and propelling people into the arms of immoderate, populist politicians. The rabble-rousers and the carpetbaggers who don't deal in governance, but grievance, who think they can unpick society's Gordian knots with their boxing gloves. So what do I mean by change? Well, I mean an end to self-defeating, antagonistic, partisan politics. I mean an end to cynical expediency, an end to kicking the can down the road, and I mean an end to short-termism. Politics made for tactical political advantage never coincides with the long-term, generational interests of the British people. Look at the scandal of RAC in our schools. Look at the state of our water infrastructure. Look at the state of our NHS. For too long, our politicians have acted tactically when they ought to be acting strategically on our behalf. They focus on the next, on the spring statement, or the budget, or the latest opinion poll, or the next election, of course, when we need them to be focused not on the next 5 months, but on the next 5 years, or on the next 50 years. We need to focus on generational progress. And that means a return to the politics of consensus and long-range planning, not the politics of tribal division. And the truth is, despite the distinction that parties seek to cultivate, despite what the media says, there's an awful lot of consensus out there. We just need to focus on it, rather than focusing upon what divides us. Forget the culture war, let's go to war on poverty and inequality. Then we'll get things done, because who doesn't want the NHS to work? Who doesn't want an ambulance to turn up? Who doesn't want sewage to stop pouring into our seas? Who doesn't want schools that aren't falling down and roads that aren't full of potholes? It's not much to ask, really, is it? But what about the hard issues like migration or Europe? Well, again, tell me which party doesn't want to control our borders? Which party actually thinks our present trade and diplomatic relations with Europe serve our national interests as well as they could? I think, if they were honest, probably very few, if any. So what are we fighting about? Well, we're fighting because that's all we know. Our system is adversarial. Our electoral system is Victorian. Government and opposition benches are divided by two sword lengths, for goodness sake. Our politics is antique and anachronistic. It's a politics that's evolved out of class division, out of Whigs and Tories and Capital and Labour. And it's devolved into polarised fringes and a great mass of people, disillusioned people in the centre. People looking for vision and leadership, but getting nothing but cheap slogans and ready-mix retail politics on the one hand, and seedy, bully boy, scapegoat politics on the other. This is a watershed election. And we know in our bones, I think, that we need something very different. We can sense we're on the cusp of something. We know we're going to have yet another Prime Minister. But this doesn't feel to me like an era of hope. It doesn't feel like a political dawn is breaking. This isn't the era of Keir Hardie. This is the era of Keir Starmer, a Labour leader who no longer offers Keir Hardie's sunshine of socialism, but apparently the sunset of socialism, the status quo, the dying rays of ambition. It's all very modest and corporate and timid. Our vision is different. It's bedded in the long tradition of liberal progress. We're not just a party, we're a philosophy, we're an engine of progressive ideas, political pioneers. Free school meals was a liberal idea, pensions, national insurance, labour exchanges, the NHS, liberal ideas. Free infant school meals was our idea. We promoted same-sex marriage, we opposed the Iraq War, and we pioneered green policy. We've always been a green party, and we continue to be one today. And one other thing, a fair electoral system. That's very much our idea too, because without that, nothing will change. And the coming manifesto is going to be bold. Bolder than Labour, bolder than the Conservatives, and focused on the long term, not on the short term. The NHS and social care is going to be central because that's how we build a healthy, motivated workforce, how we enable people to rejoin the labour market and realise their personal ambitions, and our national ambition to kickstart growth and productivity so we can build a new society on the ashes of the old. So we're not tinkering around the edges. We're not afraid of our own shadow like Labour. We're saying social care should be free. Primary school meals should be free. Childcare should be free. But it's not a cheap election gimmick. It's a long-term investment in our collective futures. And it'll be fully costed too, because we know our MPs can't just coast into Parliament on blind faith and promises. The money will come from expanded windfall tax, from a tax on share buybacks, and from fair corporate taxation. It's all about a fair deal, and we know instinctively what that means. So what Liberal Democrats stand for today, and what I support wholeheartedly, is actually the same vision of the future that William Beveridge, who wrote the blueprint for the NHS, outlined 82 years ago. He said, the essence of civilization is that men should come to be led more by hope and ambition and example, and less by fear. So I appeal to all of you to be fearless. After 40 long years, the death knell is sounding for conservatism. And we know we're going to have a Labour Prime Minister, whatever we do. So here's a thought. Consider yourself here in Hastings and Rye free, liberated from the trammels of tactical voting. Vote as you would vote if we had a fair electoral system. Try it out. See what it feels like to live in a real democracy where our voices count and our votes matter. And remember the words of the old Liberal anthem, The Land, and ask, why should we be beggars with the ballot in our hand? Let's spoil the coronation. Let's be troublemakers for those who blindly believe it's Buggin's turn and the status quo with a red rosette is good enough for you and your families and your children. It isn't, and it never has been. So let's send a message to Sunak and Starmer that we won't settle for the status quo. We won't be co-opted to a broken, self-perpetuating, short-sighted system of heads or tails politics. We won't be tormented into a tactical vote for a party we have no enthusiasm for. We won't be branded like sheep, penned in competing flocks, and herded through the polling booths every 5 years, thence to be forgotten. Let's remind Labour and the Conservatives that power does not belong to political parties. Democracy has got our name on it. It's from the Greek demos kratos, the power of the people. And this election, it's time to tell Sunak and Starmer, we want it back!